Hey, welcome back everyone. Welcome back to another episode. So in this episode, we're gonna build our amazing grid system section, the one where we have the text on the left and the image on the right. And we're gonna talk more about optimizing an image inside the grid system. We're gonna talk about different techniques for the object fit and how this would relate to our grid system. So with that being said, let's roll the intro. Alright, so in the previous episode we built with you guys this three section right here, these three display grid columns, yeah, and we forgot actually to do our Lighthouse audit, so really sorry for that. Let me click publish and let me run a Google Lighthouse audit to see if everything works fine. Now obviously you want to do a Google Lighthouse every time you do finish up a section. So let's open up our staging server. Let's do right click, inspect. Let's scroll all the way to these three boxes, so they are inside the viewport. Let's go to network, and on the online tab let's move to slow 3G. Now in a moment I'm gonna reload the page and I want to see how this will impact my performance. I want to see how this three images that, if you do remember, we did image spriting. I want to see how these images will load up. So let's do this reload. Okay, good. Okay, let's do one more time, and boom, good. So yeah, if you do remember, despite the fact that these three images live in separate blocks and separate boxes, they're in essence one big image, which in the previous episode we've been covered this. By the way, I'm gonna link the previous episodes in the video description so you guys can watch it and understand what is image spriting. Now with this in mind, let's go back to online and let's click on these arrows right here and move to the Google Lighthouse. Now I want to check for the desktop for performance, best practices, accessibility, and SEO. So let's generate report. Okay, our report is ready, and as you can see we have problem with accessibility, and let's have a look. So background and foreground colors do not have a sufficient contrast ratio, and if we click on this issue we can see that failing elements, 3 divs, and I do assume this is these three buttons we have right here. Let's hover. Yeah, these three buttons. So obviously it's really a low contrast ratio. Now in fact, on average, every user have its screen brightness set to anywhere from 15% to 20%, and on those low brightness level it's really hard to spot the text and to read the text. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to our Webflow, and remember we've created a design system. So let's go to our design system. Let's click on our button right here, and let's copy the hex code. Yeah, so with the hex code copied, let's go back to our browser and we're gonna fire up our web aim contrast checker tool. So it's right here, and if you can't find it, just go to resources, and then right here where it says tools, you can see color contrast checker. So let's click on this one. Good. Now let's paste in the background color. Let's paste our hex and hit enter, and yeah, it fails. But we also need to set our foreground color, the text color, to white. Good. So yeah, indeed it does fail on all the contrast ratio standards. So usually what I love to do is click on this color picker and make my color more vibrant and more darker. So something maybe like this. Let's have a look. Okay, almost there. So let's bring this down a little bit. Okay, let's add more saturation. And yeah, I think it's looking good. Now let's copy this new hex from here. Let's go to our Webflow and let's replace the hex code. Good. Let me publish the changes, and in a moment we're gonna refresh and see if we still have the contrast ratio issue. Okay, it's published. Let's go back to our staging server. Let's do a reload, and we can see that now we have new colors, new background colors for our buttons. So with the Lighthouse tab opened up, let's clear our current Lighthouse audit and let's click one more time on generate report. Voila, 100% on accessibility. Good. Now the last thing what I would love to check is obviously my structure. So let's go back to WebAIM. Let's click on resources and go all the way to Wave. Let's click on Wave. Let's copy our staging server URL and paste it here and click on this arrow button. So we have one contrast error, and if you do remember from the previous episode, now Wave, it cannot spot images that are absolute, and because our background image is absolute now, and because our background image is not a CSS background, then Wave cannot understand. What I'm worried right now just to simply check my structure for my three boxes right here. So I'm having an H2, that's good, and I'm having H3 right here, so everything is looking just fine. Good. Now I'm pleased. I'm having some features right here. You can go to details and see what features you have, like might be different tags applied, different HTML tags applied to your div blocks. And usually a good rule of thumb is to have as many features as you can, because obviously that's gonna be enjoyable for enjoyable. Oh my gosh, that's gonna be really good for assistive technologies. Good. Let's go back to our Webflow and let's go to our home. Okay, and the next section we're gonna build is obviously our mouth to cheek section. So mouth to cheek. I don't know why it's called mouth to cheek. Probably because like it's mouth to cheek, like the text is on the left, the image is on the right. But anyway, that's how they are called. If you know other terms of how these sections are called, just let me know. Okay, and now if you guys remember, I'm talking a lot about the mindset. So before building this section inside the Webflow, we need to have a look on our Adobe XD or Figma design and visually see how the elements are grouped together. Now I know that on the left I have a box, and inside this box I have the label, I have an H2 level, I have a paragraph, and then I end up having a button. So what I did is I grouped these together, so I know this is going to be a div block inside my Webflow project. And here on the right I already have this image, and I know that this image will live inside a container. So because I have applied like this practice in grouping my items inside Adobe XD, when I'm changing, for example, the width, you can see that everything is responsive. Good. Now let's start building our section, and keep in mind that the second section we have right here is the same section as this one, but just in reverse. So you'll see that with the display grid applied, we're gonna do some magic and we're gonna reverse the columns. So body, we choose the body, we type Command A to open up our quick find, and we type section. Okay, let's go to our element settings and make sure we change the tag from div to section. Let's go back to our style pane and add a class. So that's gonna be features. Maybe features. Oh, we already have the features. So let's go with benefits. Benefits. Good. Benefits, and inside my benefit I want to have another div block, and this is going to be our container that we've built in our design system. So container, we have it right here, and now what I want to do is I want to add some padding to my benefits section. So I'm holding the Alt key to evenly distribute my padding from the top and from the bottom, and 56 is okay. I can change this later on, but I need some breathing room to see my container. Good. So my container will be set to display grid, but before we would set this to display grid and build out our grid system, our columns, I'm gonna drop my div blocks inside this container. So I want to drop one div block, which will be the content we have on the left, and then I'm going to select back my container and I'm going to drop another div block. So I'm having the block that goes on the left, and then I'm having the image container that goes on the right. Good. So with our first div block, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a class. So let's say this will be We can go with something generic because probably we're gonna reuse this. So let's say column left. Column left, and for my second div, it's going to be benefits img-w, which stands for wrapper, and hit enter. Okay, I'm having these two div blocks inside my container. Now let's click on the container and set display to flex. I got you. It's not flex, it's grid. So with the container selected, we go to display grid. And now previously we've been covered that, hey, if you know that you're gonna have, for example, 3 columns, just like we did right here. So let me exit my grid. So right here, if you do remember in the previous episode, which you can find in the video description, we only created 1 column and 1 row, and we set the direction of the grid to columns. So every time we do create a new box, it will create also a new column for this box. But right here, because we already have some predefined elements, and because later on we'll need these predefined elements to build a reversed section, I'm gonna stick with 2 columns and 1 row. Okay, now the next thing to do is, obviously I wanted to define some gap here, but let's have a look in Adobe XD. Let's select our group right here, our div that goes on the left. Let's hold the Alt key and then hover over our image container. And we can see that we have an insane padding, like an insane gap, 150 pixels. Now that's way too much, and we're gonna have problems with our responsiveness. So what I'm gonna do, instead of adding 150 pixel as the gap between my 2 columns, right, I'm gonna add a smaller gap, and then I will simply limit the maximum width of my div block that goes right here on the left. So let's put this in practice. Going back to the Webflow, let's define right here on the top where it says gap and columns, let's define a custom gap. So I think that I'm gonna go with, let's say maybe 60. Yeah, let's go with 60 pixels. I'm gonna click done. Now let's click on our column left, and let's start defining our items that goes inside this column. So first of all, I know I'm having a label, and I already built a label for my 3 boxes section. So I'm just simply gonna copy this to my clipboard, go back to my column left, and paste it right here. Wonderful. Now let's see what else we have here. So we have an heading to level, we have a paragraph, and then we have a button that have kind of a custom width. And in a moment I'm gonna show you guys how you can define custom width for your buttons just by using display grid. Okay, good. So what we're gonna do next is, let me go back to my Webflow and define my other elements that go in the column left. So Command A to open up my quick find. It's gonna be a heading to level, and then I'm gonna choose my column left back, and quick find paragraph, drop a paragraph right here. And now for my button, because I want to control the width of my button, usually what I do is I choose my main container, which is column left, and I'm dropping a div block. Now for this div block, inside this div block, I will drop my button. So here is my button. I'm gonna copy to my clipboard and paste it right here. And later on, I'm gonna control the width of this button just by playing with the display grid of my div block right here. But for now, let's actually add the styling. So for the label, we already have the styling, and now for the H2, let's have a look. So we go back to Adobe XD, and we can see it's Rubik 40 pixels, medium, and we already defined these inside our design system. So as you can see, Rubik, medium, 40 pixels. And now, as you can see, my heading right here have a gap between the heading and between the paragraph. And usually what I do, I'm trying to find the middle element inside my container, and I know that my middle element is my paragraph. So let's actually copy my text. So what is it? Okay, so the label is what is it, and try not to use caps lock, right? Just if you're afraid, just type it out by yourself. Use small caps. So what is it? And then I'm gonna copy my heading 2 level. Remember, every section should have an H2. Only one section should have H1, and that's your header. Okay, our paragraph, let's copy the text from here. And also let's define the button copy. So button here, now usually you want to go with a descriptive name for your link blocks, because later on it's gonna give you problems with accessibility and yeah, mainly with accessibility and search engine optimization. You obviously want to tell the button what it does. And what I love to do is, instead of call to action, I love to use call to value. And the difference is really simple. Call to value emphasizes the user to take an action in order to get something back for free. So let's go with something like learn how to create your course. Good. So I think this is a really good call to value, because if you will click on this link, you will learn how to build your first course on this online course platform. Good. So learn how to create your course. Looks good to me. Looks fine. Maybe it's way too long, so let's make this smaller. Build your course now. Okay, build your course now looks good to me. And now we have to define a custom class for our paragraph. Our paragraph, it's the middle element, and obviously I want my paragraph to push my headline and my button to the bottom or to the top. So with the paragraph selected, let's go to selector and let's add a class. I'm gonna say benefits text. Benefits text. Let's go back to Adobe XD and have a look over the gap between the headline and the bottom right here. So it's 17 from the top. Let's go back to Webflow and let's set a margin of 17. And before I would set this margin, what I need to know is, in web everything is a box, and we also have the line height. So instead of going with 17, I'm going with 16. So just simply erasing 1 pixel, because look, we have the line height of our paragraph, and also our paragraph, it's basically a div block. Good. 16. Let's go back to Adobe XD and have a look over the gap on the bottom. So 58, same thing. Instead of adding 58, I'm gonna go with 56. Good. And that's all I have to do with my paragraph. I don't add any additional class to my heading 2. It's already looking good, right? I don't add an additional class to my section label, because let me show you one example now. If we go right here to help on the bottom left corner, we have the CSS preview, and if you click right here, we can see custom CSS rules applied for our elements, in our case for heading 2. Now obviously you don't have to create additional or custom CSS if the element already is looking good and it takes its properties from a predefined Webflow CSS file. Remember, we want to keep our files as small as possible, and we also want to do the same for our CSS file. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna show you how to control the width of this button. So with the container, I'm gonna choose the container of my button. We don't have a class, so let's add a class. I'm gonna say btn-w, which stands for wrapper, and then I'm gonna set this display to grid. Good. So grid is super useful in web. Like, we can control different aspects of our layout. I would say the grid is the new version of the Bootstrap columns. So let's click on done, and now you can see that it lives inside a grid system. But how to play with its size? Really simple. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna click our btn, and as you can see, we have applied a combo class btn half, which limit our button to 70% in width. So I'm gonna remove, so my button takes 100% of my container right here, which have the display set to grid. And now with my container selected, I'm gonna click right here to edit the grid, and then I can play with these items right here. Yeah, with these fraction units. If you don't like fraction units, at any point in time, guys, in any point in time, you can change to percent. And I can go, for example, with, let's say, 60%. Good. And now I have persons right here, see? And I can control my button. Good. So let's say I wanted this to be, I don't know, maybe 60%. Yeah, 60% looks fine to me. Good. And how it feels on the responsiveness? Oh, it feels really great. It feels really great. Wonderful. Good. Now just keep in mind that this container where we have our button will take 60% from our column right here. Now you can always play with, usually I play with fraction units, so what I would do is I would go right here, and then instead of percent, now percent it's more accurate, but you can do the same with the fraction unit. So let's say 1.50 FR, right? And then you can play with this fraction units. This also works great. So let me do this thing. Let me do, I don't know, maybe 0.6. Yeah, looks fine. I love fraction units more because I know I believe they're meant to be used with the display grid. I'm not telling you to use fraction units. It's my personal preference. You can use percents if you want. I just showed you a method where you can control custom, or you can have custom width of your button without adding any additional combo class to this button, right? You're basically having this grid, and you control the button width just by controlling the grid column width. Okay, so hope this makes sense to you guys. If no, rewind my video, watch one more time. Okay, let's move forward. So I have what I need right here. Now remember, we have to limit our container right here, and it takes 500 pixels in width. So with this in mind, let's copy 500 pixels. Let's go back, let's select our column left, and right here under the size we have max width. So I'm gonna drop it right here. Now what this does is it will tell, hey, your column, this container, it will become smaller than 500 pixels, but it will not become bigger or wider than 500 pixels. So the maximum wideness it's 500 pixels. That's where we have this maximum width. Okay, and now you can see that we have this gap. It's a really nice gap, but it's not a gap. It's not a gap from our grid system. It's a gap because we just applied a maximum width to our column on the left. Good. So let's move into our image. Now, previously we've been covered the object fit and how to make a normal HTML image to act as a CSS background cover or contain or whatever type of background you're using. And now for images that live inside a grid system, what we need to know is in web, grid have columns, have rows, and every column, every row have a fixed width. What this mean is, what I mean by fixed is, I mean this thing right here, so width and height. When you define a width here or a height here, this is usually fixed. It's not like setting a minimum width or a maximum width. In those instances, that's gonna be dynamic, but right here, it's fixed. You're fixing it to percent, to pixels, to viewport width, and different flexible and fixed size units. So just keep in mind that the container our image will leave is inside the second column of our grid, and our second column already have one FR, one fraction units applied to its width. What this mean is, well, we need to go select our image container, and we need to click right here on justify stretch. What this will do is it will basically apply a width of 100%. So our image container will take 100% width from our second column in our grid system, which is limited to one fraction units. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is obviously to add a height, so I can use my object fit. So let's go right here, let's click on our image. Yeah, so we select our image and we have a height of 787 pixel. Let's copy this and paste it right here and hit enter. Good. Now my image container takes full width from our second column in our grid system, which is 1 fraction units, and also right now we have defined a fixed height. Now the next thing I want to do is obviously to set up a background color, because if for some reason my user have a slow internet speed and my user starts to scroll my page, at least he knows that this empty space is meant to be a container for my image. So with this in mind, let's just define a small and a really light background color. I think this gray works really fine. Let's go back to our Adobe XD and let's have a look. So I'm also having a border radius of 2 pixels, and to be honest with you guys, probably I'll go with 5. I love when it's more rounded. So with our image container selected, let's go to borders, and on the radius let's type 5, so it's 5 pixels now. The next thing I wanna do is to make sure I click overflow set to hidden, because everything that will be outside this container will basically be cropped. Okay, so our image container, it's ready. It's now the time to add our image. So with my container selected, Command A to open up my quick find, and I'm gonna type image. Wonderful. Now let's go back to our design right here, and I'm gonna take one moment to explain you one more technique to optimize images that live inside the grid system. So the thing is, you never ever want to make your image wider or bigger than its container. So for example, look, this image container, it will not get bigger than 564 in width, and it will never get taller than 787. Never export your image in 4K resolution if the container where this image will live will not get bigger than the size you have in your design, right? We already have a container that it's limited to 1200, so my website will not get bigger than 1200, right? And remember that we have applied 1 fraction unit to our second column, so that means my image will not get bigger than that. So with this in mind, and because I wanted to optimize my image, let's copy it, let's paste it outside of our view of our canvas, so right here, and let's remove the border radius. Good. Finally, before exporting, obviously I want to add a name, so let's say benefits-img1, and I'm gonna do right click, export selected. And now I'm gonna choose JPEG because it's a stock image. I want to flatten out all the pixel information. Alright, let's click export. Here is our image, and now what we're gonna do is we're gonna open up our compressor.io tool to drag and drop our image and optimize it. So with the compressor.io opened up, let's go to our home page and let's drag and drop right here. Good. As you can see, we saved 84% from 145 kilobyte all the way to 23. So let's download our image and let's replace it with our original one. Good. So our image is right here. We now have to import it inside the Webflow. So let's open up a Webflow. Let's click on our assets and let's expand this panel. Now, if you do remember, we should create a folder for every page, so it's better to manage our assets. So with my homepage folder selected, let me go back to my homepage local folder and drag and drop my image right here. Good. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to exit this assets panel and I'm gonna add my image. So choose image and this one. Good. And if you do remember, we have to define a width and a height, and the width should be equal to the source image width, and same goes for the height. So my width is 464 and my height is 787. Let's type enter and let's leave the load as lazy loads on scroll. Good. Now for my alternative text, what I can do is I can go to my assets folder. I can open up my image, and when you hover over the image, you're gonna have this gear icon. So just click on this gear icon and it will open up the assets detail. And right here I have the alternative text. And let me explain you the difference between descriptive and decorative. Now, you're using a descriptive image when you have an infographic, when you have some, I would say, information inside your image. So infographics, maybe a snapshot of a dashboard, something along those lines. Also, images that do have alternative text, they also optimized in Google. And finally, when someone uses assistive technologies, when they hover with their mouse on your image, the screen narrator will basically narrate your alternative text. So it's important not to use a lot of keywords, but rather to describe your image. So let's assume that this image we have uploaded, it's an infographic, and let's go to descriptive, and right here I need to type a description for my image. Woman smiling and looking at computer screen. I think that's good. And now what I'm gonna do is, you can see right here it says use alternative text from assets or custom description, and I'm gonna go with use alternative text from my asset. Good. Let's close our assets and let's close this one. So I'm having my image right here. And finally, what I need to do is obviously to add a class and then later on use the object fit. So with the image selected, let's add a class, and I'm gonna type benefits-img, which stands for image. And under the position, we have, actually not position, it's right here is size. We have this fit, and we're gonna apply our object fit. And before applying our object fit, remember, in order for the object fit to work and our image to act as a background image, we need to define a width and a height. So my image will take 100% of its container, and its container takes 100% of the grid column, which is set to 1 fraction units, so everything is fixed. And for my height, same thing, 100% from those 787 pixels. And now finally, what I want to do, I want to click on fit and change fill to cover. And now if we do exit, as you can see, if I'm going responsive right here, my image acts as a cover. Now don't worry about this limit right here. We will add a gap once we finish up our desktop version. We'll talk about responsiveness. We'll optimize this landing page for different screen for different devices. But for now, let's make sure we build the entire desktop layout, and then we can talk about the responsiveness. Good. So we have our section right here. And now what I want to do is, obviously I wanted to center these items. So with my container selected, what I'm gonna do, let's have a look. So container, and oh my gosh, we have applied a display grid here. So let me do reset. I don't apply any display grid. I obviously want to add a combo class here, guys. So yeah, again, sorry for that. We don't have to change our container. We want to add a combo class. So let's add a combo class here, and I think we can go with benefits grid. I think that's good. So benefits grid, let's go to display grid and just do the same thing. So 2 columns, 1 row. It will save our properties we have applied previously. And again, sorry, I haven't seen that we have applied display grid for our container. Good. So now let's click done, and with our container selected, let's click right here to align our items to the middle of our container. We have to apply one more HTML tag, and that's the figure tag. So we're gonna go and select our image container. We're gonna go to element settings, and from the tag we're gonna switch from div to figure. This is super important because we want to define that this is a figure. By default, Webflow do apply a 10 pixel margin to figure tag, as you can see right here. So I'm gonna click on my bottom margin, and I'm gonna click 0 to toggle this off. Lastly, I want to copy my benefits section and paste it one more time, and then reverse. So let's copy my benefits. Let's go back to the body, and let's paste it right here. So I'm having the same section, but how to reverse this? Really simple. So what we're gonna do, because we have this amazing display grid, we're gonna select our image container, and attention, we're gonna hold the shift key. And now with the shift key selected, I'm gonna click on my image container, I'm gonna hold my click, so hold your click and drag your image container to the left and release your click and the shift. That's simple. Okay, let's copy our second image. Let's paste it outside of our artboard, and we also have this 2% 2 pixel border radius. Let's toggle this off. And now I don't want to make any image spriting here, guys. Chances are my client will need to change these images in the future, so I want to make sure he is okay with how to change all of that. Chances are he don't know how to do image spriting, and I don't think that having two separate images will affect a lot our site performance. So you need to think about this. Will this be okay for my client or for myself later on to change these images? If your answer is yes, then yeah, you can go ahead and use image spriting. So our second image is right here inside my folder. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna fire up my compressor.io, guys, and just simply drag and drop the second image. So we compressed 85%, 29 kilobytes. That's good. Let's download and replace this optimized image with our original image. Let's go back to our Webflow, go back to our assets panel, click on the home page, and inside this homepage folder, I'm gonna drop my optimized second image. Let's click on our benefits IMG, double click to open the options, and click replace image. And let's click on this one. And as you can see, I'm having the same width and the same height. So laser load, all looking good for me. Now the last thing to do is to replace the content we have on the right. Generate a report. Remember to have performance, best practices, accessibility, and SEO toggled on. And for device, you want to go with desktop. And voila, everything looks wonderful. 100% on all the categories. Okie dokie. So guys, in the next episode, we're gonna build our Webflow form component. We're gonna talk about the form labels. We're gonna optimize the accessibility of our form. We're gonna talk how to set up our form, and we're gonna go to project settings, set where the form will send all of the submissions, and basically that's it. Like, we're really coming close to finishing up this landing page, and once we're gonna finish up the desktop, I'm gonna make one more episode to show you guys how to make the responsiveness, and that's going to be so much fun because we already built a design system. We already followed the best practices in HTML structure and HTML hierarchy, and that's gonna be so easy to create the responsive version of our landing page. Love you all. Bye bye.